let's move on to the next part. So here, what we will be doing now is we will be talking a bit about the types of tafsir. So this is an interesting area, and here we will be talking about the different types of tafsir. And what I will do here, and this is quite novel, very new, and that is I will give you examples of the different types of tafsir in this particular sense. So let's just start off by getting you guys to give me some kind of idea of what you think are the qualifications required for someone to be a mufassir. And this will relate to the whole idea of the different types of tafsir. So what I want you to do is just give me a bit of an indication about what you think are the required qualifications for somebody to become a mufassir. What kind of knowledge areas would you expect them to have? You know, I've given you some random numbers between 5 to 10. Clearly, there are a lot more than that. But what we'll do is we'll just get you guys to mention a few. Tell me what you guys think would be, in essence, a requirement for you to have when it comes to being able to correctly transmit the meaning of the Quran. Okay, so we've got a couple of examples here. And I'll try to answer some of your questions. There's 1 or 2 questions here. There's 1 or 2 questions I don't completely understand what you mean by them. But anyway, so Jens mentions we need to have a deep understanding of the Arabic language. Okay, very important. Arabic language is an absolute essential. If you don't understand Arabic, then you are in essence dependent on somebody else for the language. And you know that element dependence suggests that you can't directly connect with the Quran in its understanding. So you've got Siraj al-Haq, who he's saying that command over Arabic language, correct understanding of hadith. Yes, so you need to have a good understanding of the science of transmission. So even though I made reference to these particular mufassirin who are clearly students of Abdullah ibn Abbas or Abdullah ibn Mas'ud and so forth, in essence, we need to ensure that that line of transmission is clear in the sense that we know that there is no element of a narrator that's missing in that line of transmission. There is nobody who's fabricating anything in that line of transmission. So for that reason, you need to have a good understanding of the science of hadith. Okay, well versed in Arabic, thorough knowledge of hadith, needs to be a Muslim. Okay, so yes, this is another very important thing, that this individual needs to be a Muslim. Now we may ask, surely if you have an understanding of all these sciences, then why do you need to be a Muslim? Surely, you know, the intellect is no different, so we can assume that a non-Muslim can also interpret the Quran. But no, the answer is a very clear no to that, and I'll explain later on why that is. Needs to have a deep understanding of the Quran. Yes, so there's a number of different sciences, like we talked about Ulum al-Quran, so that would require you to understand that. The history of the religion of Islam, to some degree, yeah, we need to know the history of Islam. Understanding of the religions that spawned from the earlier revelations, so Judaism, Christianity, especially if you're looking at the idea what we call Israeliyat, which we made mention of in last week. Judeo-Christian sort of narratives. So on that basis, yeah, that would be very useful knowledge to have. And somebody very clearly has mentioned something which is important, and that is piety. So knowledge of the situation in which verses were revealed. So that's asbab an-nuzul, recognizing what they are, and also having a sense of piety, or what we can call taqwa, etc. So yes, these are some of the qualifications that are required. So let me just indicate, just 1 second, I've got a few more. So again, Arabic language, context of revelation, and having trustworthiness and good memory. Yeah, so these are all important components. Okay, let's just outline some very important. Notice how spiritual is an essential area. Okay, so the spirituality is a very, very important aspect of your ability to transmit the meaning of the Quran in the sense of your understanding. So number 1, you need sincere intention. Your intention must be sincere, that this is only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you're not doing this for personal gain, whether it be monetary gain or for fame or whatever. You have to have the correct belief. So your belief has to be correct, otherwise you will misunderstand verses of the Quran or misappropriate the meanings of certain words there in line with your particular deviant belief maybe. Then the other is not to be an innovator and honor the Quran. So it's clearly somebody who is quite loose in the sense of their interpretation, to the degree that they tend to interpret outlandish types of meanings, and they commit a sense of bid'ah. Then those kind of individuals will also do and apply that same concept to the Quran, and that could be problematic. And clearly having piety and taqwa, having this element of fear of Allah, that if I give an incorrect translation here, then I will be held to task. Whereas if you don't have that sort of level of obligatory duty, then you can transmit the Quran and give any kind of meaning to it. You don't have that level of fear. Then you have the academic end, and the academic end is more issue of aqidah, having a sound aqidah, sound theological belief, understanding of the principles of tafsir, which is what you guys are sort of learning now, knowledge of Arabic language, so this is about grammar, and it's not just about Arabic grammar, but also rhetoric, balagha, etc., and adab, which is literature, Arabic literature and its usage. Then also having a knowledge of the authenticity of the qira'ats, so also the different types of recitations of the Quran, knowledge of usul al-fiqh and fiqh, so you also need to have a knowledge of fiqh and usul al-fiqh, which is the principles of fiqh, and that's important because that will allow you to understand the Quran in more depth. Knowledge of hadith, which we talked about earlier on, and also there's something else about Allah has to endow you, just like I made mention of these great Sahaba radiallahu anhum, who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had endowed them with this deeper understanding of the Quran relative to the other Sahaba radiallahu anhum. So on that basis, you need to have this great blessing and ni'mah of Allah, to have this basira in understanding, this insight into understanding the Quran in many different ways. Okay, so these are some of the qualifications we made mention of. Now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the most common approaches or types of tafsir. Okay, so in this sense, what I'm going to do is I will give you a break period now. And in this break period, what I will do is I'm going to go through each one of these, and I'm going to give you examples of each one. So this is a time, maybe some of you need to read Asr if you're in the UK. So I'll give you a bit of time to go on, read your Salah if you need to. And then inshallah, we will be back in approximately 15 minutes, inshallah. And then we will continue, and we will talk about a number of different topics related to the types of tafsir. And we'll go into quite a bit of, we'll give many different examples of verses of the Quran, and how we would analyze them and decide what kind of tafsir is this. So we will talk about those different sort of ideas. And I think sort of if you look at it from a practical perspective, you guys will have a better grasp than me just to teach you in theory. So Jazakumullah khair, and I will we'll come back in 50 minutes. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So let's just continue. We've got quite a lot to get through. So before I do that, there's a question here by Jens. When were these qualifications defined? By whom? Were people's understanding of what tafsir is and who can interpret the Quran clear at the beginning? Generally speaking, these were things that developed over time. So people realized that as sciences grew, because sciences don't just stay stagnant, they develop over time. Then people started realizing, this is a very important area of knowledge that we need to really grasp to be able to understand the Quran better with greater depth. So as a result of that, sort of as time went on, these things became cumulative, and then this view is more sort of in line with what scholars think of today. Okay, so let's just go into the detail here. So inshallah, now I'm just going to go through a number of different verses of the Quran to give you a demonstration of these different types of tafsir. So when you pick a particular book of tafsir, you'll find that there's a different approach in each one of them. But generally speaking, the main thing to take from this is virtually all of them encompass a number of these, mainly the first two. So tafsir bil ma'thur and tafsir bil ra'i. It's an approach where you will find other books of tafsir which have a greater level of emphasis on what we call tafsir al-ishari, and there you have those kitabs which also have what we call Tafsir al-Ahkam, which is more to do with Islamic rulings. And then we will briefly talk about modernist tafsir. So let's just give you a couple of examples of what we mean by tafsir bil ma'thur, or tafsir based on narrations. And that's what, in essence, what it means. It means that there is a lot of emphasis on top on the basis of transmission. So we are fundamentally focused around the transmission of hadith and how that relates and tells us or gives us an understanding of the Quran. So here we have related by an example of what we call tafsir bil ma'thur. So you'll find, for example, in Ibn Kathir or Tafsir Tabari, which are two sort of common kitabs known as tafsir bil ma'thur. Here you'll find examples like this, for example. So I'll say that Muslim, which is a hadith book, Abu Dawood and An-Nasa'i are authentic, the 6 canonical kitabs of hadith, all recorded from Anas radiallahu anhu, that he said, while we were with the Messenger of Allah in the masjid, he dozed off into a slumber. Then he lifted his head smiling. We said, O Messenger of Allah, what has caused you to laugh? He said, verily a surah was just revealed to me. Then he recited this particular surah. So he said, إنه أنزلت عليها آنفا سورة فقرأ بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. So indeed, we have given you al-Kawthar. Read your salah for your Lord, praise your Lord, and read your salah for your Lord, and sacrifice. Indeed, your enemies are the ones who are cut off. So I'm not going to go into the details of what this means. So what that actually suggests, therefore, then he said, do you all know what is al-Kawthar? So the Prophet ﷺ turned to the Sahaba and he said, هَلْ تَدْرُونَ مَا الْكَوْثَرِ? Do you know what al-Kawthar is? We said, Allah and His Messenger know best. Allahu Rasul Alam. He said, verily it is a river that my Lord, the Mighty and Majestic, has promised me, and it has abundant goodness. It is a pond where my ummah will be brought to on the day of judgment. It contains its containers are numerous to the stars in the sky. Then a servant of Allah from among them will be prevented from it, and I will say, O Lord, verily he is from my ummah. So in other words, I will basically say, فَأَقُولُ يَا رَبِّي إِنَّهُ مِنْ أُمَّتِي. He is from my ummah. Then Allah will say, verily you do not know what he introduced. إِنَّكَ لَا تَدْرِي مَا أَحْدَثُ بَعْدَكَ. You do not know what he has introduced, what he has innovated. So here you will see, number one, an exploration and an understanding of this particular verse of the Quran on the basis of a clear hadith related by Anas radiallahu anh. And here you'll see also some indication to what al-Kawthar actually is. So this is called Tafsir bil Ma'thur. So where certain narrations of hadith are presented in relation to verses of the Quran, then those are considered as a type of tafsir, which is Tafsir bil Ma'thur. So just to give you guys a bit of an idea about which kitabs would have this in, you have kitabs like Jami' al-Bayan fi Tafsir al-Quran of Imam Tabari. You have Bahr al-Ulum of Imam Samarkandi, Kashf al-Bayan by Imam Nisaburi, Tha'labi Nisaburi, and there are other kitabs as well, but they are the sort of more common ones. Also you have one other, which is a Dur al-Manthur fi Tafsil bil Ma'thur of Jalaluddin Suyuti. Okay, so these are some of the common kitabs which are considered as Tafsir bil Ma'thur. Let's go on to the next one. So we have tafsir based on expert opinion. So tafsir bil Rai, given opinion. So here you have, for example, الَّذِينَ يُؤْلُونَ مِنْ نِسَائِهِمْ تَرَبَّصُوا 14 فَإِنْ فَاءُوا فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ يَخْرُجُ مِنْهُمَا اللُّؤْلُؤُ وَالْمَرْجَانُ. So here, for those who swear not to have sexual relations with their wives, is a waiting time of 4 months. But if they return to normal relations, then indeed Allah is forgiving and merciful. So you will have here, for example, in these particular cases, this particular verse and how should it be taken in that particular sense. So these particular verses are basically mentioned, and as a result, you'll find different mufassirun, they will give their understanding of these particular verses. So you will see, for example, that the Shia sect, what they do is they have an understanding of some of these verses of the 12 Shia. So on that basis, for example, this particular aspect, which is Maraj al-Bahrayni yaltaqiyan, he released the 2 seas meeting side by side, they would take from that the two C's in the reference here is Fatima radiallahu anha and Ali radiallahu anhu. So they are referring to the two C's, are referring to these two individuals, the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the daughter of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. يخرج منهما اللؤلؤ والمرجان. Some would interpret this as Hassan and Hussein, and this is basically, in essence, what is really taken from this is a sense of opinion that is given related to a particular verse of the Quran. Now, this could also be very similar to what we call Tafsir Ishari, but the main point to take here is you give your own particular opinion, but you can also have different sects with a different aqidah or a different understanding who may interpret this in their own way, which would, to us, as Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, we would probably consider that at that time as being something of an innovation in terms of the interpretation of those particular verses. But there is scope for that, as long as the essence of the verse and the primary connotation of that verse is not deviated from. Rather, you can give secondary meanings of certain verses for certain themes, but not in the sense that that is the true understanding of, or the essence of what this verse actually means. So this is considered as a tafsil bil rai. Then you have what we call tafsil ishari. So here you have an example where we can say, وَلَوْ أَنَّ كَتَبْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ أَنِ اقْتُلُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ أَوْ اخْرُجُوا مِنْ دِيَارِكُمْ مَا فَعَلُوهُ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا مِنْهُمْ. So here what this particular verse is saying, and we have decreed upon them, kill yourselves or leave your homes, they would not have done it except for a few of them. And what that is basically saying is that this may be approached by Sufis, and they may approach this particular verse and they take a different meaning from this. Not necessarily there's a primary connotation meaning from this, and there's a clear understanding of what this verse means, but there's a secondary connotation that people may take from this. So say, for example, and if we had decreed upon them, kill yourselves or leave your homes, they would not have done it except for a few. So some may say here, uqtulu anfusakum, referring to the fact that you kill your diseased heart. In other words, you kill your diseased heart so that you become subservient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And here, when it refers to nafs or anfus, then what it refers to is the spiritual heart, that you keep that alive on the basis that it stays remaining only connected with Allah, and you kill all the idols that are in that heart, which basically keep you away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And these are going into inner meanings of tafsir al-ishari. Now, I'm not going to go into the discussion before I start getting all sorts of entries in terms of what we call tafsir mahmud and tafsir mazmoom. So tafsir mahmud is basically praise tafsir. It is the correct tafsir, and the ulama have no issue with that. But you have what we call tafsir mazmoom, and that is when you take a meaning beyond what would practically be considered as an essence of a verse, and it's going into deviancy. Then on that basis, that would be considered as dispraised tafsir, or a form of bid'ah in relation to a tafsir. So in this main point to take from here is, in these particular three types of tafsir, going back to tafsir bil ma'thur, clearly if the narration is sound, then that tafsir is sound. Tafsir based on expert opinion, as long as that opinion remains within a particular confine and with conditions. We're not going to go into the details of that because that's not my role today. My role is just to introduce you to the topic area. That's more so in the more detailed subjects, or the course, those of you are interested in. Tafsir based on inner meanings, or tafsir al-ishari, that goes into much deeper inner meanings and from a certain theme, like I talked about with the Sufis' approach to that particular verse of the Quran. Then we'll just quickly go with the tafsir al-juris, and then we'll finish on that, and then we'll continue from there. So we have, for example, here, tafsir al-juris. So وَلِلَّهِ الْمَشْرِقُ وَالْمَغْرِبُ فَأَيْنَمَا تَوَلُّوا فَثَمَّ وَجْهُ اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَاسِعٌ عَلِيمٌ. And to Allah belongs the east and the west. So wherever you might turn, there is the face of Allah. Indeed, Allah is all-encompassing and all-knowing. So the question arises that there's a disagreement about the reason for the revelation of this ayah. And on that basis, you will see that the different fuqaha, the jurists, differ in terms of the opinion what this verse indicates in terms of rulings. So, for example, Amir ibn Rabai says that it was revealed about some people who prayed in a direction other than the Qibla on a dark night, as is transmitted by At-Tirmidhi. So as a result of that, they did not know where the direction of Qibla was. They could not see where the moon was, and they could not orientate themselves. For that reason, they just did tahari and made an opinion, an educated opinion, and then started reading in that direction. Now, is that an acceptable salah? Let's say it becomes daylight, and then you realize, oh, that was the direction. What is the ruling there? So you'll find in Tafsir kitabs, there are elements of Tafsir al-Ahkam where certain rulings are put. So you have examples of that, like, for example, here. So here you have in Tafsir Qurtubi, okay, where there is some mention of this. So in Tafsir Qurtubi, for example, it says Sufyan ibn al-Mubarak, Ahmad and Ishaq, also a position of Abu Hanifa rahimullah. They say that if someone prays on a cloudy day in a direction other than the Qibla, and then it later becomes clear to him that he did not pray in the right direction, his prayer is allowed. Whereas Imam Malik, it is preferred that he repeats the prayer within the time, but that is not an obligation of him because he has performed his obligation as he was commanded to do. And Al-Mughira and Imam Shafi'i, they say the prayer is invalid because facing the Qibla is one of the preconditions of the prayer. So you have the different opinion of jurists in relation to verses of the Quran. So this is called Tafsir al-Ahkam. And in that sense, you will find different components of this within different kitabs. So just to give you some kind of reference of kitabs, what we Ashur Qutub al-Tafsir al-Ishari and Ashur Tafasir Ayat al-Ahkam. So when it comes to Tafsir al-Ahkam, you have, for example, Ahkam al-Quran according to the Hanafi fiqh, like, for example, the Tafsir of Imam Jassas, Tafsir al-Jassas, or you have Ahkam al-Quran of the Shafi fiqh, for example, where you may have Tafsir Qiyal al-Harasi, and so forth. Okay, so you have even Tafsir according to different madhabs. So this, in essence, gives us a bit of an understanding about the different types of tafsir that you may have, and a majority of tafsir kitabs have a combination of these types in there. Others are solely dedicated to one particular type of tafsir.